everyone, it's Alexis with Project Management Made Simple. In this video, I'm going to answer the question, how do you evaluate a change request? A change request is a request that comes in, typically to the project manager or to the product manager, and it will need to be considered against various factors that it can impact on the project. So a change request can have a change that impacts your scope, your schedule, your budget, quality, or even potentially your resources. And so the whole goal when you receive a change request is going to be to evaluate that change request, have an understanding of the impact on these various project factors, and then give that information to the person requesting the change so that they can either make an approval or they can decide to not move forward with the change request. So when we're reviewing a change request, there's a couple of things, a couple of key pieces of information that we want to look for. First thing is understanding what is the change request. If I'm working on a software project, which I personally typically, a lot of my projects are software based, then a change request might consist of a feature that maybe was not thought about at the onset of the project. And so then the customer will send in a change request requesting that particular feature, and we'll want to understand what feature it is that they are requesting. We'll also want to understand why. Could it be that this feature is going to allow the customer to capture more market share if it's implemented into their system? Which brings us to the next point of what we will want to look for in the change request, which are the implications if the change request is not implemented. So as the example that I gave, it could be that they want to have this change because it could be some market share that they'll be able to capture, but there could also be negative implications, such as if we're working in an HR system and there's some type of compliance that has to be met as a means of using this system, then the implications that if this feature is not implemented into the system, well then the system can't go live and the customer won't be able to get any sort of return on their investment of the project. So when we're working to analyze the change request and the impact on the project, we'll want to work closely with the team members who are going to actually implement the change. So again, going back to our example, if I'm working on a software project, I want to work closely with the programmers and whoever else is going to implement the software feature. And so I want to look at first the schedule. What is the amount of time that the programmers think that quality assurance is thinks that it's going to take to actually get this into the system? And then I, as the project manager, will then look at the entire schedule and see how is that going to affect other things in the schedule, such as dependencies. It's possible that the feature that's being requested could also have some sort of impact on the other requirements that we have built or that we haven't built yet. So that's something else that we'll want to consider, is how this change request will have an impact on the other scope or the other features that we have already in the system or that haven't yet been built but are in our backlog. So another project factor that will likely be impacted by the change that we'll want to look at is going to be our cost. So we know that we have a budget at the onset of the project. We have a good idea of what the features are going to be in the system, or we at least, if we're running Agile, we know that there's a certain timeline and that there's a certain budget that we have, and whatever features are, encompassed in that, then we will work with that. In any case, we're going to have a set budget for the project. And so this particular feature could come with an associated cost to that. If it's something that we're working on a software project and its configuration, maybe it doesn't cost as much to do that configuration. Maybe it could be a couple of minutes, even less than an hour. So we don't charge the customer for it. But if it's some custom development, then it could mean that it's going to have a lot more effort, meaning a lot more hours associated to actually implementing that feature. And so we'll want to consider how much that cost is going to be and the overall impact to the project's budget. Another factor to consider that could be impacted is going to be our quality. If we are implementing a software feature, we want to understand, do we have the current software or do we have the current quality assurance process set up that will allow us to properly measure the quality of this particular feature? Now, typically in software projects, I haven't seen it where we have a new feature that comes in that requires some specific tool, but maybe if we're not working in the software world and we're working in the manufacturing world, right? And we have some sort of project and we have a change request that comes in, and it could be that the reason for this change is to comply with some regulatory standards or some compliance standards, something in regulation. And so then we'll have to ensure that we have a way of properly measuring what the quality is, what the output actually is of the deliverable. And so that is something else to consider, is how quality will be impacted on our project. And finally, we'll want to take a look at our resource availability. We've looked at our schedule, we looked at the budget, we looked at the quality. We also have looked at the dependencies between the various requirements. So we'll want to also have an understanding of, if this change is implemented, will I have the resources that I need to implement this change? So yes, I may be working on having an understanding of the change with the resources that I think will be implementing the change, but in the real world, resources are not working on just one project. And realistically, we could have a forecast where we're working with our program manager and they have a forecast of how they want to use the resources. So if we find out that this particular change is going to add 6 months to the schedule, we do have to ask ourselves, will those resources be available at that time, or will they be staffed on other projects, or anything else that could potentially pull the resource away from actually being able to implement this change? It's something that we'll want to consider as a part of analyzing the change request. This was a video answering the question, how do you evaluate a change request? If you found it helpful, please do give it a thumbs up, and also feel free to leave any questions below in the comments, and I will talk to you all in my next video.